Story holds 1,000 seeds, a proverbial pomegranate, a jewel of possibilities, a not so silent.
All right, then I think we have just one performer left who has been among our most prolific performers. He has been writing weird shit long before the Not So Silent Planet ever came into being, and I hope we'll be writing weird shit long after we are forgotten. Please welcome to the stage our concluding performer of the evening, Pat Harrigan.
Woo!
Yeah.
Woo! Good evening, everyone. I hope you are well tonight. I have been asked to contribute to tonight's online performance. It gives me great displeasure to have to do so, but by the terms of the highly restrictive contract negotiated by my personal assistant, Cameron, whose annual bonus will be smaller than usual this year, I am compelled. By my presence and through sheer force of will, I hope to lend some last-minute dignity to these proceedings. After all, I am a recognized authority in several disparate fields, such as European folklore, early Byzantine history, and speculative pornography, have been published in innumerable international academic journals, and am in much demand as a keynote speaker, professional wrestling MC, and expert courtroom witness. Like Taylor Swift, I have a big reputation. I have been asked to provide an historical capstone to this evening's entertainment, if that's the right word, and as we all no doubt have better things to do during a terrifying global pandemic, I shall be, by my usual standards, brief. Thanks in large part to 80 years of Walt Disney adaptations, most of us are familiar with quite a few Middle European folktales, Pinocchio, Snow White, and so on. These are, of course, only a small fraction of the stories that have come down to us. The Brothers Grimm included 86 tales in their first collection of 1812, and the final 1857 edition had grown to 210. But even that book was far from comprehensive. How could any book ever be? Folk tales by their nature seem to come from everywhere and nowhere at once, springing to popular attention seemingly overnight, but proving upon examination to have been widely known for a long time. Their origins seem to recede forever, further and further into the past. In the words of the French philosopher Jacques Derrida, they are always already there. It is one of this type that I wish to discuss tonight. Known in English as the Goblin Games, in German Koboldspiele, some commentators have speculated that this tale formed part of the inspiration for Christina Rossetti's famous 1862 poem Goblin Market, but I think this is unlikely. The story was apparently unknown to the Brothers Grimm, being absent from all editions of their collected fairy tales, nor does it appear in Bernhard Bader or any other folklorist until Ingo Schaefer's 1932 collection, Bayerische Esrelungen. So it seems unlikely that Miss Rossetti was familiar with it, and in any case, the plot details are very different, and the story presents a more conventionally heterosexual environment compared to her rather more sapphic one. Still, certain passages do bear an undoubtable resemblance, so I suppose it is at least possible. The story, set in the Black Forest region of southwest Germany and dating back at least as far as the 16th century, if Schaefer is to be believed, goes something like this. A young woman, alone in the forest one day, comes across a group of goblins playing by a river. They challenge her to a variety of games, foot and swimming races, archery contests, etc. The young woman, evidently familiar with the usual course of events in stories such as these, declines, not wishing to be tricked into wagering her youth and beauty or her immortal soul or something. But eventually the goblins convince her with assurances that anything she loses will be trivial, barely anything at all, since it is all in fun. And such did it appear, as over the next days and weeks, she competes with one goblin or another in climbing games and dancing games and dice and card games and feats of skill such as juggling and speed embroidery. Sometimes she would win and be awarded with a fresh yellow dandelion or an interesting rock. And sometimes she lost and had to write her names 5 times in the sand, or sacrifice a lock of her hair, or let the goblins tickle her feet for half a minute. She competed with distinction in the pie-eating contest, ultimately coming in a close second to a fat, pig-snouted goblin, and the list of various pies consumed in the contest is, I'll admit, pretty reminiscent of the famous list of fruits sold by the goblin merchantmen in Christina Rossetti's poem. You'll recall her marvelous lines: apples and quinces, lemons and oranges, plump unpecked cherries, melons and raspberries, bloom down-cheeked peaches, swart-headed mulberries, wild free-born cranberries, crab apples, dewberries, pineapples, blackberries, apricots, strawberries, all ripe together in summer weather. The pig-faced goblin won a goblin pie recipe book for his victory. The young woman received, as you might expect, a pie in the face. Her most memorable triumph was in the long insult contest, in which she and the goblins traded barbs about the hygiene, deficient intellect, and bizarre sexual proclivities of each other's close family members, with judges scoring each contestant according to inscrutable and seemingly arbitrary criteria. Her strongest competition in this game was a small ferret-faced goblin who had proven to be adept at many of the previous games as well. Responding to his assertion that her father had cuckold's horns so elaborate they kept getting stuck in the roof beams, she called him a floppy, toothless fish licker, which probably gets a blank stare from most people, but which left the judges in stitches and is quite a bit funnier in the original High German. You'll just have to trust me on that. For this performance, the ferret-faced goblin presented her with his most treasured possession, a small silver-backed mirror that he could not even handle himself, but kept wrapped in rags and soft moss to avoid it burning him. She unwrapped it carefully and saw her face in it, while the goblin looked admiringly on. From that day, it always seemed to be the two of them competing. Her eye for darts was unparalleled, but he was better at capturing butterflies, leashing them to strands of long grass until the forest floor fluttered in a carpet of colors. He swam better than she, like a creature born to water, but her long legs could outpace him on any road. Sometimes she won and the goblin would do a silly dance for her, or sometimes he did and she was compelled to balance a sleeping otter on her head, while the goblin giggled and crept through the grass to release the butterflies one by one. Then there came a day when he challenged her to a foot race of the sort they had competed in a dozen times before. He said he had been practicing, and he set the stakes. "If I win," he told her, "you will marry me." This development was not entirely unexpected to her. "I agree," she said. "And if I win, you will marry me." Strangely, Schaefer doesn't actually tell us which of them won the race, but in any case, they were married a few days later with all the goblins, imps, fairies, and witches, and a few humans in attendance. Most of her family disapproved of this match. They didn't like the goblin's inappropriate jokes or his smell. They didn't like how the milk always curdled in its dish whenever he came to visit, or the way his weird mushroom-shaped penis would poke out from the leg of his short German shorts. Her mother and father were especially disappointed, at least at first, although the small children in the family found him friendly, and fat Aunt Gertrude thought he was hilarious, laughing uproariously in conversation with him and forever slapping him on his clammy, bony back. They had no children, and he outlived her by several centuries, such is the way of goblins. But Schaefer tells us that he returned to the forest and hosted games in her honor every year on the date of their wedding anniversary and never married again. Losers in the games would be dunked briefly in the river, and winners would receive a garland of flowers that withered before the end of the celebration feast. It wasn't much, but I guess the contestants took it all in the spirit in which it was intended. Like the lady says, you play stupid games, you win stupid prizes. Thank you, friends, for attending our show tonight. Please give generously to Strike Theater. Goodbye for now, and be well.
Yeah.
Yay!
Keep it going for Pat Harrigan. Pat, do you have anything coming up? Places people can find you online?
Yes, I do, Phil. Thank you for asking. If anyone is interested in reading more of my spoken word stuff from the previous several years, I have a book called The Lecture Tour by Pat Harrigan. It is available on Amazon.com, or I could tell you a copy in person if we ever are done with social distancing.
All right, well, keep it going for Pat and keep it going for all of our performers tonight.
Story holds 1,000 seeds, a proverbial pomegranate, a jewel of possibilities, a not so silent